If you are deciding between FreeStyle Libre 2 and Dexcom G6, then don't click away, because this is the only video on YouTube in April 2021 comparing these two CGM systems. Let's go! Guys, I spent 2 months testing FreeStyle Libre 2 and Dexcom G6 head-to-head, and in this video I'm gonna share with you what I found out. This will be a longer video because I just have so much to share, but feel free to use timestamps down below to skip to the part that you are interested in. Before I jump to the details, I just want to say I'm not getting paid for making this video. I'm just here to present my own subjective opinion on these two systems. I'm not working for the big companies behind these CGM solutions. I'm working for you. I'm helping you navigate your diabetes journey. Guys, I've launched a Patreon page where you can ask me any questions and you have guaranteed response. I also post some bonus content there, like some behind the scenes videos and live streams. The link is in the description. But now let's jump into this video and compare Libre 2 and Dexcom G6. And let's start with what these two devices have in common. They are both great tools to continuously monitor your glucose without pricking your fingers. They both tell you where your glucose is right now by showing you the number and where it's headed by showing you a trend arrow. You simply place a patch with the sensor on your skin with a tiny filament going under the skin. Both devices read the glucose from the interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between your blood vessels and cells. The sensors will not tell you your actual blood sugar, but the sensor readings from the interstitial fluid give you a pretty damn indication of what your actual blood sugar is. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that the sensor readings are always lagging a little bit behind the blood glucose readings. In my case, it's approximately 10 to 15 minutes. So in other words, the sensors are showing me what my blood sugar was 10 to 15 minutes ago. But now let's focus on the differences between the Libre 2 and the Dexcom G6. And I found 9 differences. And difference number 1 is how you actually use these devices. The Dexcom G6 is a true continuous glucose monitor, and it automatically feeds all the data every 5 minutes from the sensor to your device via Bluetooth, no matter if you use Dexcom reader or your phone. You don't need to do anything, and all your numbers and all your charts will be automatically saved on your device. Now the FreeStyle Libre 2 is still a flash glucose monitor, so it also takes the readings every 5 minutes, but it will not automatically send them to your device. You always need to scan the sensor with your device to initiate transfer of the data from the sensor to your device via NFC. It's like when you pay with a contactless credit card. This is also done via NFC. If you don't scan your Libre 2 sensor and look at the graph, then you will only see your graph until the point in time when you last scanned. And with Libre 2 you kind of want to scan every 8 hours, because the sensor only stores the data for 8 hours. If you don't scan for 9 hours, for example, then you will have a 1 hour gap in your graph and you basically lose the data for this 1 hour. By the way, you can set a reminder in your Libre app that will remind you every 8 hours that it's time to scan your sensor. So it's not such a big deal, but for me personally it's so much more convenient and so much more discreet to have the data automatically transferred to my phone from the Dexcom G6. Let's be honest, sometimes we get too busy and we don't have time to scan, or we just don't want to scan because we don't want to raise attention. We don't want people to ask questions.
What is that on your arm? Are you a cyborg or something?
When I'm using the Libre, I typically scan around 10 times a day, because I want to see what my blood sugar is doing every time before and after I eat or do any physical activity. And I have to admit that the scanning bothers me a bit. So when it comes to the overall ease of use, I definitely prefer Dexcom, and I would give Libre 2 8 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 10 out of 10. Next, I want to talk about design of these sensors, because they look quite different. This is not a fashion channel, but I think the FreeStyle Libre 2 is really good looking, just like me. Libre is very sleek, very modern. It has the size and shape of a €2 coin, so it's quite small and really thin. The Dexcom G6 transmitter sits in a separate transmitter holder, which makes it stand out a lot more. It's a bit longer, thicker, and definitely bulkier and more medical looking overall compared to the Libre 2. You might say it's not a big deal, but for me, as someone who went from Libre to Dexcom, it took some time getting used to the bulkier shape of the Dexcom G6, especially when getting dressed and undressed, being active and working out. Now I can guarantee you that if you're not careful, you will rip out any of these two sensors, but I definitely had more incidents when I was close to pulling the sensor out with the G6 compared to the Libre 2. Another thing to consider is your comfort when you sleep. And again, the bulkier shape of the Dexcom will probably bother you more than the Libre when you lie on it in bed. Now you should not lie on any of those sensors, because if you put too much pressure on the sensor, it will result in inaccurate readings and so-called compression lows. I'm just saying it's much more comfortable to be in bed with Libre 2. That sounded really weird, I know. The last thing that bothers me a bit about the Dexcom design is the adhesive. The adhesive is a lot bigger than the Libre adhesive, and in my case, it typically starts peeling off after a few days. I noticed that I'm using an overpatch a lot more with the G6 compared to Libre 2. So overall, when it comes to design, Libre 2 wins for me, and it gets 10 out of 10, and Dexcom G6 gets 8 out of 10. Difference 3 is how easy it is to apply and remove the sensors. And applying Libre 2 has always been super easy. It literally takes only 30 seconds to apply the Libre 2 sensor. It's just a matter of preparing your skin, 2 simple clicks, and starting the sensor with a simple swipe of your reader or your phone. And in my opinion, even if you are new to this technology, there is nothing that you can do wrong with the Libre 2. With the Dexcom G6, things get much more complicated because there is a much longer series of steps that you need to take. First, you need to let the system know that you're going to change the sensor. Then you need to pair the new sensor with your device, remove the transmitter from your old sensor, apply the new sensor, connect the transmitter to your new sensor, and start the new sensor on your device. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a rocket science. You can still do it, but from my experience, it requires a lot more focus and time to change the Dexcom G6 side compared to the FreeStyle Libre 2. The application and removal of these two sensors is not painful at all. You don't need to worry. You will feel it, but it doesn't hurt more than a finger prick. Fun fact, the Libre sensor goes in under the 90 degrees angle. The Dexcom G6 goes in under a 45 degrees angle. Isn't that interesting? Another important thing when it comes to side change is the warm-up time. So the FreeStyle Libre 2 sensor warm-up time is 60 minutes and the Dexcom G6 warm-up time is 2 hours. So again, not a deal breaker, but just keep in mind that with Dexcom G6, you will be without your CGM readings for 2 hours, which is twice as much as with FreeStyle Libre 2. So when it comes to sensor application and removal, I would give Libre 2 10 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 only 8 out of 10. And that's especially because of the longer warm-up time and a bit more annoying side change process. By the way, I have a few videos where I show you how to insert and remove both of these sensors, so definitely check them out if you're ever unsure. Hey guys, I just want to quickly jump in here from the future. As I'm editing this video, I realized I didn't tell you what are the approved sides for these two sensors. So for FreeStyle Libre 2, the only approved side is upper arm, where I have the sensor right now, and this goes for all of the countries. For the Dexcom G6, if you are outside of the US, you can use also upper arm, where I have my sensor right now, or you can use your abdomen. If you are in the US, then for the Dexcom G6 you can only use your abdomen. And if you are under 18, then you can use your upper buttocks for Dexcom G6. Let's jump back to the video. Difference number 4 is wear time. So how long can you use these two sensors? Well, the official wear time of the G6 is 10 days. After 10 days, your G6 is expired and you need to do a side change. The official lifetime of the Dexcom G6 transmitter, which is the gray piece, is 3 months. So it's really important that you don't throw away your transmitter after you used it once and you use it repeatedly with multiple sensors. The official lifetime of FreeStyle Libre 2 is 14 days. So here you have to do the side change every 2 weeks. Now, in my experience, I have been able to wear both of these sensors for the full period of their official lifetime. You might need to put on a patch just to avoid pulling the sensor out, or the sensor coming off too soon, but I think it's totally manageable to keep them on for 10 or 14 days respectively. Now for me, changing the sensor site is not something I love to do, and that's why I give Libre 2 9 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 8 out of 10 for wear time. Difference number 5, and another super important aspect of these two devices, is alarms and alerts. And both of these devices have highly customizable alarms for when your blood sugar is too low, too high, or when your device loses the signal from the sensor. And you can of course set your own levels at which you want to get alerted. What I do is I set 4.5 millimole for my lows and 8.5 millimole for my highs. Now with the Dexcom G6, you also have an option to get alerted when your glucose is rising or dropping sharply, which you can't get with Libre 2. This can help you catch those moments that can lead to very high or very low blood sugars really soon. But to be honest, my blood sugars don't spike and drop very sharply very often, so I didn't make use of this Dexcom G6 feature. By the way, with both systems, you can pick and choose which alarms and alerts you want to receive and which ones you don't want. You can switch any of the alarms on and off as often as you want. So for example, if you don't want to be disturbed at night by a high glucose alarm, you can switch it off before you go to bed and switch it back on in the morning on both of these devices. The only alert that you can never switch off is the urgent low alarm on the Dexcom G6. So when your blood sugar gets to 3.1 millimole level, your Dexcom G6 will always scream like crazy. Now, if you have been watching really carefully from the beginning, then you are probably asking, how is it possible that I receive alarms on Libre 2 if the Libre 2 is using NFC technology to transfer the data? How can I get the alarm if I don't actually scan? Well, that's a very good question, and I have to admit I've been hiding something from you. The Libre 2 has Bluetooth as well, but it uses the Bluetooth function only to initiate the alarm. It doesn't send the information about what your current glucose actually is to the reader. This is done via NFC. So in other words, on Libre 2 you get an alarm that tells you you're high or you're low, but you still need to scan to see how high or how low your actually is. I mean, it would be so much easier to see the number right away, but it doesn't show it to you until you scan. And that's why I give Libre 2 8 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 9 out of 10 for alarms. There is still room for improvement for both. Guys, I bet the number one thing that you want to hear is which of these CGMs is more accurate. So let's get to difference number 6. Accuracy. I have been using Libre 2 for almost 2 years, and I have to say that Libre 2 has always been very accurate when I compared the sensor readings to my glucometer readings. I would say that 99% of time I was within plus minus 15% difference from my glucometer reading when taking into account the lag that I was talking about at the beginning of this video. Overall, I would say that most of the time Libre 2 is reading a little bit lower than what my actual blood sugar is, and that's what I'm also hearing from other users, but I never really had any big issues with Libre 2 when it comes to accuracy. In those almost 2 years with FreeStyle Libre 2, I never got a faulty sensor, and all my sensor readings were very accurate, so I definitely had much less issues with a FreeStyle Libre 2 compared to FreeStyle Libre 1. So it seems to me that Abbott really did make some improvements from the first generation to the second generation of FreeStyle Libre. Now, to be honest, I was quite surprised how inaccurate the Dexcom G6 was for me on day one. Until today, I used 7 Dexcom G6 sensors, and 3 of them were actually giving me quite inaccurate readings on day one of wearing the sensor. The biggest difference I got was when my G6 was showing me my glucose was between 2 and 3 millimoles, which is extremely low, but my actual blood glucose was between like 6 and 7 millimole, and this was going on for almost 2 hours. Now this difference is unacceptable for me, but before I start bashing Dexcom G6, I just want to unpack this a little bit and shed a little bit more light on what it actually means. First of all, I know that all CGMs are typically less accurate on day one, and it's caused by the fact that our body has to get used to the filament being put under the skin, because it's a foreign subject and our body just needs some time to get used to it, and that impacts the accuracy of readings on day one. After day one, the readings should normalize, and this is really what I saw with the G6. On my day 2 and day 3, the readings were always much better, and I actually kept on using the sensor. I kept on using 6 out of the 7 Dexcom G6 sensors because the readings normalized and they were not so much off on the other days except for day 1. Second, Dexcom G6 has one big advantage compared to FreeStyle Libre 2. And that is that you can calibrate it. You don't have to, but you can. And the calibration is a standard functionality of the G6 system. You don't need a third-party unauthorized solution to do it, which is the case with FreeStyle Libre. So if your G6 readings are a bit off, you can calibrate the sensor to fix it. But anytime before you calibrate it, please do some research, because it's not so easy and you can make things worse if you don't calibrate properly. In short, you should only calibrate when your blood sugar is stable and when the difference between sensor glucose and blood glucose is not too big. But there is so much more that goes into calibration, and I will make a separate video soon when I will show you how to calibrate the Dexcom G6. So I'm gonna make this a tie and give both Libre 2 and Dexcom G6 9 out of 10 for accuracy. There is definitely room for improvement for both. The Dexcom G6 has been slightly less accurate, but I was able to calibrate it and fix the issue. So I think the tie is fair here. Now let's talk about difference number 7. Apps. Now in most countries, both of these systems are supported by apps that you can use on smartphones, both Android and iOS. The main app for G6 is called Dexcom G6, and the main app for FreeStyle Libre 2 is called LibreLink. Both of the apps are very good, and they give you all the information you need about your current glucose, where you're headed. They give you alarms, and you can also add notes of any events like food or exercise. The LibreLink app actually gives you much more than that. Right within the app, you can see your 7 to 90 day trends, averages, your estimated A1C, and a lot more of the technical statistics that you can use for your treatment decisions. Now, if you want to get nerdy with your Dexcom G6 and view all the stats on your phone, you need an app called Clarity, so it's a separate app. Unfortunately, in my country, the Clarity app doesn't work, so I didn't have a chance to test it on my phone. But Clarity actually worked on my computer, and I think that the Clarity app is very comparable to the LibreView app that also works on computers. And so these two apps, Clarity and LibreView, are really great tools to share all your data and all your reports with your doctors, and something to look into if you want to get really nerdy with these systems. Now, if you are in the US, please note that at the time of filming this video in March 2021, the LibreLink app is not yet approved by the FDA for Libre 2 sensors. So in the US, the only way to use Libre 2 right now is this blue reader. You cannot use your mobile phone just yet. Both of these systems have separate apps that you can use to share your blood glucose data with your loved ones, or that you can use if your child is a type 1 diabetic to view their data. These apps are called LibreLinkUp for Libre 2 and Dexcom Follow for the Dexcom G6, and I will put links to all the apps that I talked about in the video to the show notes. So I haven't found a clear winner in the apps category, but I want to be very strict here and give both Libre 2 and Dexcom G6 7 out of 10. I think both companies and their apps could do a lot better in terms of design and functions. Difference number 8, and this might be a key one for a lot of people, is cost. Now, I'm very lucky because in my country, my insurance covers both of these solutions. So FreeStyle Libre 2 and Dexcom G6 are both covered by insurance. Now, my insurance covers 26 Libre 2 sensors per year, or 27 Dexcom G6 sensors and 3 Dexcom G6 transmitters per year. So when you think about it, if I use the Libre 2, I will get free sensors for 364 days. But when I use the Dexcom G6, I will only get sensors and transmitters for 270 days. And that leaves me with a 3-month period where I basically either need to purchase the sensors or simply don't use a CGM. And that's quite big for me because, by the way, the Dexcom G6 sensors are much more expensive than FreeStyle Libre 2 when I purchase them over the counter. And so I really need to think about what I'm gonna do for those 3 months if I keep using Dexcom G6. And so I'm giving Libre 2 10 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 8 out of 10 for the cost category. Difference number 9 is integration with other devices. With Dexcom G6, I get my glucose readings on my Apple Watch. And so now when I'm using the G6, I'm able to check my glucose just by taking a quick glance on my wrist. Libre 2 doesn't let me do that. With Libre 2, the only thing I can get on my Apple Watch is a push low-high alarm notification. What I really love about the Dexcom G6 is that it integrates with insulin pumps. Currently it integrates with the Tandem's t:slim X2, which I use, and Omnipod patch pumps. And this is fantastic because when I connected my Dexcom G6 to my Tandem t:slim X2 insulin pump, I was able to turn on the Control IQ functionality, and I created a closed loop. And with the closed loop, the insulin pump actually adjusts my insulin dosage depending on the current glucose and its trend. And I will definitely make a separate video on looping and the Control IQ system because I think this is such a game changer. It changed my life a lot. It makes it a lot easier, but it also has some disadvantages that I need to talk about, and I will make a separate video on this topic. Now, Libre 2, how should I say this? Libre 2 doesn't really integrate with anything. That bothers me. It seems that Abbott is not so open to integration with other companies' systems and solutions. Maybe they will do it with the Libre 3 that's coming out soon, but right now their system is totally closed and nobody can use any kind of commercial loop functionality. And that's why I give Libre 2 1 out of 10 and Dexcom G6 8 out of 10 for integration. And I really hope that Libre 3 will get better when it comes to integration. Now, before I share with you my final decision on which CGM system I will be using, I want to talk about something that I think is extremely important. You know, when it comes to deciding between FreeStyle Libre 2 and Dexcom G6, please don't believe to everything that people write on the internet. And especially when it comes to accuracy. I feel like every CGM user in the community, myself and all the internet trolls included, has an opinion on which CGM system is better. And those opinions are typically based on a one-off experience of that one person. But we are all different. And when you look at independent results of independent clinical studies that are done on statistically significant samples of patients, then you can see that both Dexcom G6 and FreeStyle Libre 2 are very accurate devices. The Dexcom G6 achieves slightly better results, but the difference is so tiny that I don't believe we can say any device is really more or less accurate than the other. And of course, accuracy is super important for us diabetics. But what I believe is that at the end it comes to what is important for you. Is it design? Is it accuracy? Is it ease of use? You decide which of these systems is better for you. And if you have a chance to test both of these devices before you decide for one of them, I would definitely recommend that you do it, because at the end it comes to your personal preference. As for the results of my test, Libre 2 got 72 points and Dexcom G6 got 73 points. Really close result. As for me, I will stay with the Dexcom G6 for the time being, but when the Libre 3 is launched, I will definitely test it, I will use it, and I will make a video review for you on my channel. And if you are a Libre user, don't worry, I'm not leaving you. I actually have a few very exciting videos about Libre lined up that I will be posting in the coming weeks on my channel. But now don't forget to check out my Patreon page, link is in the description, and if you want to learn about Libre 3 and Dexcom G7, then go click on one of the videos on the screen right now. I will see you there. Ciao!